We've noticed that the child actors James Cameron casts suffer for his amusement while he builds his legacy. And The Way of Water just drives home the point that he doesn't care about kids. It all goes back to his directorial debut, 1982's Piranha 2: The Spawning. Cameron is commonly known for starting the Terminator franchise in 1984, but his directorial debut was Piranha 2: The Spawning. And obviously, when he was just starting, he didn't have much money to spend torturing baby characters. But still, he managed to sneak a kid into the horror movie, as one piranha killed an unnamed boy to get Gabby to cause more menace. We could say that he didn't have much choice, since Piranha 2's making was so chaotic that Cameron rarely counts it as his first real movie as a director. But he knew that he had to make up for the failure of Piranha 2 with the Terminator franchise. Well, for this one, he decided that child characters shouldn't be in danger. But since his movies are only fun if kids are suffering, Cameron did bring them back eventually. After the success of '84's The Terminator, Cameron had all the money he needed to make kids suffer. So he made Terminator 2: Judgment Day, which is about a killer robot from the future looking for a young John Connor. And to make his point very clear, the first scene of Terminator 2 shows a playground being destroyed and toy horses catching fire right in front of our eyes. Yep, he just wouldn't leave the kids alone. But what came after Piranha 2 and the Terminator franchise was some of his best work, mostly in torturing kids, in Aliens and Titanic. Interestingly, for the 1986 blockbuster, Cameron would try out the idea of having a single kid suffer for the whole movie in Aliens, where he put young Newt, played by Carrie Henn, alone on a planet full of xenomorphs. Oh, come on, man. This was before he made Terminator 2, but this wouldn't be the last time a monster kidnapped a young girl in Cameron's blockbuster. As we saw in Titanic, the evil Caledon Hockley, played by Billy Zane, kidnaps a child to get a spot on a lifeboat. But while there's no doubt that Cameron's movies are visually stunning, that coat of spectacular paint makes us forget every time he puts a child in one of his movies. He makes sure they suffer at the hand of evil. Now, we're not sure if Cameron does this for dramatic effect, but from what we saw in The Way of Water, we think that children are destined to suffer if Cameron is directing. At first glance, it might seem like Avatar: The Way of Water is all about how much you love your family. But despite that, Cameron didn't take long to dash our hopes and ensure that all the children must suffer.
Before your birth,
we have Jake, the head of the family, a man who can't forget his military training and runs his family like an army, demanding blind obedience and being unable to show love, just like most of our dads. On top of that, we find out that Spider is the real son of Colonel Miles Quaritch, who's even more of a jerk than Jake. The Way of Water also puts the kids in the middle of a bloody war, as if their biological ties weren't enough punishment for crimes they didn't commit. And on both sides, whether they're the Navis or the humans, there is death around every corner. Jake and Neytiri's children have to deal with being shot at, beaten, kidnapped, and held hostage over and over again for almost 3 hours. And when villains who want to start wars aren't using Navi children as currency, they're being chased by Pandora's animals, trying not to drown and getting into all kinds of accidents. On top of that, no child is left alone, and some of them don't even make it. And as if the physical pain of the kids in The Way of Water wasn't bad enough, Cameron also wanted to scar their souls. We saw Spider left with no choice but to help Quaritch, even though he has to see the damage humans cause on Pandora. As if that wasn't bad enough for poor 15-year-old Spider, Neytiri nearly kills him and takes him as a hostage to make Quaritch stop. And even though Spider spent his whole life learning the Navi way and turned his back on humanity, one of the few parents he has ever known almost kills him in cold blood. My guy, you've got to tone it down. Cameron might think we don't know what he's really up to, but guess what? We're paying close attention. And we think he can't make a movie with kids in it without making them suffer. But The Way of Water is just the latest example of how little he cares about them. But kids are not the only thing that makes it on James's hate list. James hates Marvel and DC characters as well. During an interview with the New York Times, the director, who has won 3 Oscars, gave his opinion on the 2 biggest superhero movie series and their characters. And we should warn you, it doesn't sound pretty to us. Cameron compared the Marvel and DC characters to college students in his review, when he said they all have relationships but don't. He also thinks a lot of Marvel and DC characters lack the one thing that grounds us. We wonder what that might be. Well, the superhuman strength and invulnerability seem like too much of a stretch for the experienced director, who's busy completing his Avatar pentology within this decade. Talk about irony. Cameron also seems to have a problem with the fact that these superhuman beings don't seem to be real or have a purpose. But he's not the only famous person in Hollywood who thinks this way. Francis Ford Coppola, Ridley Scott, Martin Scorsese, and other directors feel the same way as Cameron and think superhero movies today lack a certain level of emotion.
So I'm up to them.
Scorsese even went a step further and said he doesn't think of Marvel movies as cinema. Well, it kinda makes sense coming from a filmmaker who mostly focuses on mob life. But let's dial it back to James Cameron, who surprisingly has an interesting relationship with Disney, the owner of Marvel Studios. Well, the thing is, the Mouse House has put a lot of money into bringing the Avatar franchise back, and making sure people remember how important the first movie was to the industry before the sequel came out in December. But there's a big elephant in the room, or in this case, an infinity gauntlet.
50% of all living creatures.
We lost.
Avengers Endgame briefly replaced Cameron's Avatar as the highest-grossing movie of all time. And even though Avatar got back on top after its 2019 re-release in China, the fact that an Avengers movie passed Cameron's crowning achievement probably made the veteran director angry. What's also interesting is that James Cameron probably said these things because one of the stars of the Avatar franchise is also a major character in the MCU. Yes, Zoe Saldana, who plays Gamora in the Guardians of the Galaxy series. On top of that, she also had a big part in the last two Avengers movies. And one of those dethroned Cameron from the box office.
Hey, we met a few years ago at the airport in Germany. I got really big.
Is this an old message?
Ant-Man, I know you know that.
It's the front door.
And while it doesn't prove that James Cameron could be wrong about the superhero genre, it does tell us that actors, producers, and directors can play in box sandboxes. Plus, not every movie needs to have a neutral point of view, as all art is personal, and cinema is easily one of the best inventions ever to come from humanity. On that note, what are your thoughts on Cameron's unnecessary hate for children in his films? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.